There is a specific kind of grief that the world has no proper ceremony for. When a romantic relationship ends, there are rituals. There is a language for it. People understand. They bring food and wine. They sit with you. They say the right things about time and healing and how you deserve better. The grief is recognized. It is given a shape. But when a friendship ends, when the person who knew you most completely in the world simply, quietly replaces you with someone new, nobody brings food. There is no language for it. People say things like, oh, friendships change, people grow apart. It's just life. As if the 9 years of 2 a.m. phone calls and shared secrets and the particular deep knowledge of another human being can be filed under it's just life and set aside without cost. My name is Emma. I am 34 years old. Yet I live in Nashville, Tennessee, in an apartment I chose partly because it was 2 streets away from a woman named Claire, who was, for 9 years, my closest friend in the world. Claire does not live there anymore. She moved across the city 18 months ago. She moved with her new best friend, Brooke, into a house they share. They have a book club and a standing Sunday brunch reservation and an Instagram account that documents their life together in the way that people document things they want the world to see. I am not in any of those photographs. I have not been in any of those photographs for 2 years. This is the story of how I went from the person Claire called first to the person she used to know, and of what I found slowly, painfully, and eventually with something like gratitude on the other side of that loss. So Claire and I met at 22 in the first week of graduate school. We were in the same program, English literature, which tells you something about us. And we were both the kind of people who had always lived slightly more intensely inside books than outside them, and we recognized that quality in each other immediately the way people sometimes do when they see something of themselves in a stranger. She was from Vermont, small, dark-haired, with a dry sense of humor that appeared without warning in conversations, and a habit of making observations about people that were so precisely accurate they were almost uncomfortable. She read everything. She remembered everything she read. And she had the quality I have come to most value in a person. She was genuinely curious about the world and about the people in it in a way that made you feel when she turned that curiosity toward you, like you were a thing worth being curious about. We became inseparable within the first month, not in the dramatic, all consuming way of some friendships that burn bright and exhaust themselves, in a quieter, steadier way, the way of people who have found their rhythm together and are in no hurry to disturb it. We studied in the same library alcove. We walked home together after evening seminars. We made dinner in her apartment and argued about books and talked about everything else until midnight, and then went home and texted each other things we had forgotten to say in person. Graduate school ended. We both stayed in Nashville, she for a job at a publishing house, me for a writing fellowship that became a permanent position at a literary magazine. We moved into separate apartments, 2 streets apart. We had a standing Wednesday dinner and a rotating Sunday morning coffee spot, and the kind of friendship that functioned in all practical senses like a partnership. I do not use that word lightly. Come to me at my lowest point in those 9 years and ask me who I would call, and the answer required no thought at all: Claire. It was always without question Claire. I was the same for her, or I believed I was. That is the thing I've had to sit with most carefully in the 2 years since the distinction between what I believed and what was actually true, because I am no longer certain they were the same thing. Now, and I am not sure whose perception was the more accurate one, but for 9 years, it felt entirely real. And then she met Brooke. Brooke arrived in Claire's life through work, a new colleague at the publishing house. Hired in the spring of the year, everything changed. Claire mentioned her first in a text, just a passing thing. Funny new coworker, very sharp, we had lunch today. I thought nothing of it. Claire had work friends. I was not the kind of person who needed to be my best friend's only friend. I had never been that person. I thought of our friendship as expansive enough to accommodate whatever else either of us brought into our lives. Over the following months, Brooke's name appeared more frequently. Brooke had said something funny. Brooke had recommended a book that Claire was obsessed with. Brooke and Claire had gone to an exhibit on Saturday. Oh, were you free Saturday? I thought you had that thing. I had not had a thing. But I let it go. I let it go because I trusted Claire completely, because I told myself that friendships have seasons, and this was simply a season in which she was energized by a new connection. And that was fine and natural and not something that required any particular attention from me. I let it go for longer than I should have. The Wednesday dinners started to shift, rescheduled once, then twice, then replaced with a group dinner that included Brooke, which was fine. I met Brooke, I found her perfectly pleasant, I had no reason to feel threatened, and I told myself I didn't. But I did. I felt it arriving the way you feel a change in weather before the sky shows it. A pressure shift, something in the atmosphere that your body registers before your mind catches up. The Sunday coffees became irregular. The texts became shorter. When something happened in my life, good or bad, the reflex to call Claire was still there, as immediate and automatic as ever. But the calls lasted half the time they used to. And sometimes she was busy, and the busyness had a name now, and the name was Brooke. I told myself I was being irrational. I told myself this for 8 months, and then Claire told me that she and Brooke were thinking of moving in together, into a house 2 streets away from where I lived. She said it over brunch, not our brunch, a group thing, 4 of us, lightly, the way you mention a plan that is already decided rather than a conversation that is still open. She said it and then moved on in the conversation before I had fully processed it. I smiled and said that sounded exciting, and I drove home and I sat in my car in the parking garage for 25 minutes because I understood sitting in that car that the thing I had been telling myself was irrational was not irrational at all. I had been replaced, not in a moment, not through any single decision, but steadily over 8 months, as quietly and completely as a tide coming in. I had been replaced. 9 o'clock to 12:30, Act 3. The grief nobody names. I want to try to describe what it feels like, because I think if you have experienced it, you will recognize it, and if you haven't, you may not fully understand why it hits as hard as it does. It is not like the end of a romantic relationship. While in a romantic ending, there is usually a reason, an incompatibility named, a betrayal discovered, a conversation that closes something. There is a before and after, there is a moment you can point to. Being replaced in a friendship has no such moment. It is a slow fade, a series of small absences that accumulate into a large one before you have quite registered what is happening. And because there was no fight, no confrontation, no identifiable rupture, you have nothing to hold on to, no version of events to return to, no clarity about what happened or why or what, if anything, you could have done differently. You are simply less present, and then less than that, and then gone. And nobody says goodbye. That is the part that I found hardest. There was no goodbye. No conversation where Claire sat across from me and said, "Our friendship has shifted. I want you to know that. I'm sorry for how it happened. You matter to me, and I want to be honest with you about what has changed." There was nothing, just the gradual, merciful, or perhaps merciless fading of the thing that had been, without my consent and without any proper ending, simply over. I tried once to address it, 6 months after the move, when the silence had become impossible to continue pretending was normal. I asked Claire if we could meet, just the two of us, for coffee the way we used to. She said yes. Of course, let's find a time. And we made a plan, and she canceled it, and we made another, and she was busy. And the third time I suggested something, she responded so warmly and vaguely that I understood there would be no third time. But I stopped asking, not from anger, not from pride, from the particular exhaustion of pursuing something that does not want to be caught. I cried more in those 6 months than I had cried in years. Not constantly, I functioned, I went to work, I saw other people, I maintained the surface of a normal life, but now in the private hours, in the evenings when I would have once texted Claire something small and funny and waited for her reply, in those hours, the absence was very loud. I missed her the way you miss someone who has died, which is strange to say about a person who was alive and well and 2 miles away, living her life with her new person. But that is what it felt like a loss that had no funeral, like grief with no permission to grieve. But there came a point about a year after the move when I had to sit down and ask myself a question I had been avoiding. Not, why did Claire replace me? Though I had asked that too in circles without arriving anywhere useful. The question was, what does it say about me that I'm still, a year later, defining myself primarily by this loss? I had become, without quite noticing it, a person whose inner life was organized around an absence. Every good thing that happened, my first instinct was to reach for the phone to tell Claire, and the reminder that I couldn't was its own small grief, repeated daily. Every quiet evening was measured against the evenings we used to have. Every new friendship I tentatively began was compared unfavorably to the thing I had lost. And I had made Claire's replacement of me into the central fact of my current life. And sitting with that recognition on a Thursday night in my apartment with a cup of tea I hadn't meant to let go cold, I understood something important. She had moved on, and I had not. Not because I loved her more than she loved me. I genuinely don't know if that's true, but because I had not yet done the thing that moving on actually requires. I had not looked honestly at what I was without her. For 9 years, so much of my identity had been organized around being Claire's person, the one she called first, the one who knew her best, the one whose position in her life was so established it felt like a fact rather than a choice. And now that position was gone. And I had been standing in the space where it used to be, looking at where it had been, rather than turning around to see what else was in the room. I made a decision that Thursday night. I was going to find out who Emma was, not Emma Claire's best friend, just Emma. And I was going to do it not as a way of getting over Claire, but as a way of being honest about something I should have been honest about long before the replacement happened. I had been pouring so much of myself into that one friendship that I had not built the full, varied, independent life that a person needs to be resilient when any one part of it changes. Claire's replacement of me had hurt so much, partly because she had been holding so much of me. That was not entirely her fault. Some of it was mine. The year after that Thursday was the year I built myself back. Not dramatically, not in a montage of self improvement and triumphant moments. Slowly, practically, with the same quiet attention I had always given to things that mattered. I started writing again. Not for the magazine. I had been doing that all along. I mean, writing for myself. The kind of writing that has no audience and no deadline and no purpose other than the putting of things into words, because the words help them make sense. I had stopped doing that sometime in my mid-20s, and I had not noticed the stopping until I started again and felt the specific relief of it. I took a class, a creative writing workshop at the community center, 8 people around a table on Thursday evenings. Nobody who knew me or knew Claire or had any existing expectation of who I was. I was simply a person in a room with a notebook. That anonymity was unexpectedly freeing. And I called old friends I had let thin during the years when Claire had been my primary social world. Some of those friendships rekindled easily, the way good friendships do when they are given room. My friend Joanna, who I had met in college and drifted from, came back into my life over a series of phone calls that became video calls that became a visit to her in Chicago. That was one of the better weekends I have had in recent memory. I started to notice things about myself that I had not had occasion to notice when my social life was so organized around one person. That I was on my own, funnier than I had realized, not because I had been quiet around Claire, but because when you are always the secondary voice in a friendship, there are things you don't hear in yourself. That I had opinions and instincts and ways of seeing the world that were entirely my own and did not require anyone's endorsement to be valid. That I was, in fact, someone worth knowing, not as someone's best friend, as myself. I ran into Claire once in the grocery store about 14 months after the move. We hugged warmly, we asked about each other's lives with genuine friendliness. The conversation lasted 8 minutes and was perfectly pleasant and perfectly surface level. And when we said goodbye, warmly with promises to catch up properly that both of us knew were unlikely to be kept, I walked to my car and I did not cry. I noticed that. I noted it carefully, the way you note a milestone, the absence of the cry. Did the fact that 8 minutes of ordinary warmth with a person who had once been the center of my world could now simply be 8 minutes of ordinary warmth. I realized, standing beside my car in the grocery store parking lot, going to be all right, not because I had stopped loving her. You do not stop loving 9 years of a person, but because I had finally, after 2 years, built enough of a life around myself that the loss of her was something I could carry rather than something that was carrying me. People ask me about karma in this story. They want to know if something happened to Claire, if Brooke turned out to be a bad friend, if the Instagram brunch life fell apart, if justice arrived in the form that justice in stories usually arrives, cleanly, visibly, satisfyingly. I am going to tell you the truth. I don't know. Now, I don't follow what Claire does anymore, not because I'm angry, like, I am not, or not in any way that is still sharp, but because paying attention to someone else's life is a way of making their life the measure of yours. And I spent 2 years doing that without meaning to, and I am done with it now. What I can tell you is my karma, because karma is not only the thing that happens to the person who wronged you, it is also the thing that happens to you, the growth, the clarity, the life that becomes available when you stop organizing yourself around an absence. My karma is this. I have Joanna, who calls me on Tuesday nights and whose friendship costs neither of us performance. I have the Thursday writing group, where I am known for my own voice rather than for my proximity to someone else's. I have the manuscript I have been working on, quietly, slowly, without pressure. That is the truest writing I have ever done, and that would not exist if I had spent another 2 years waiting for Claire to come back. And I have myself more fully, more honestly than I have had myself in years. That is the karma, not her loss, my gain. And it is, I say this with full knowledge of how long the road was, more than enough. If you are somewhere in the middle of this story right now, if you are in the part where the loss is still fresh and the absence is still loud and the grief has no ceremony and no permission, I want to say something to you, Flee. What you are feeling is real. Friendship, grief is real. That the specific pain of being replaced, of watching someone who knew you completely redirect that knowing towards someone new, is a real and significant loss. You are not being dramatic. You are not being irrational. You are grieving something that mattered and that is entirely appropriate. And also, hear me on this, the person who replaced you did not define your worth. I know that is easy to say and very hard to feel. I know that when you're in the middle of it, the replacement feels like a verdict, like evidence of something lacking in you, like proof that you were not enough, not interesting enough, not easy enough, not whatever enough to hold the position you had occupied. It is not proof of that. It is proof that people change, that some connections have seasons, that the person who was your person at 25 may not be your person at 34, and that this says nothing definitive about either of you, only about the particular chapter you inhabited together and the different ones you are now in. The work, the hard, necessary, ultimately freeing work, is to stop measuring yourself against the person who left and start discovering who you are in their absence. Because that person, the one who exists outside of any particular friendship, outside of any particular role, outside of being anyone's first call or favorite or chosen person, that person is worth knowing. Trust me, I know her. This has been Soul Tales. My name is Emma, and on Thursday evenings, I sit around a table with 8 people and I read them the words I have been learning to trust. And not one of them knows that I used to be someone's best friend. They just know that I am someone worth listening to. That turned out to be enough. More than enough.